Split Fiction is a game that is so unique and at such a high level of quality, it almost feels insulting to call it just a video game. If Hazelight Studios aimed at creating a game full of other video games with It Takes Two, their second attempt with Split Fiction is so ambitious, it almost feels like a dream when you're playing it. And I don't mean like a dream because it's so incredibly fun and beautifully built, even though it is. I mean like a literal dream. A nothing makes sense, but somehow it all works, lucid dreamscape of fun, yet really enjoyable and challenging experiences. And every new chapter in turn leaves you saying, this game is incredible, how could it possibly get any better? And then it actually gets better. This is probably one of the hardest games I've had to review because it is so jam-packed with video game references, humor, creativity, and downright blissful mechanics. You could probably just make one video about all the gameplay ideas that are clear references and inspired by games like Contra or Donkey Kong Country or even Returnal. You could probably make an entire video about how some of the sections, environments, and mechanics are so fun and well built that they deserve their own full game. You could probably make an entire video about how co-op games should study this game to see how to properly build cooperative systems, combat, boss fights, and puzzles. But in this video, I'm going to attempt to paint a picture as to why this is another clear Game of the Year contender and why it will likely ruin every other co-op game that you touch. And I'm going to attempt to do this by talking about the basics, but also about the journey. But before I get into it, remember to hit like and subscribe so you can see my other content. Let's get into it. You might think that a game where you constantly switch to new environments, where you have new abilities, game mechanics, and methods of traversal could be a bit disorienting, and it likely was a huge risk when they attempted to up the ante in Split Fiction after the success of It Takes Two. But there is a brilliant undercurrent of basics in this game that really holds the entire package together. Much like how movement was intuitive and felt great in It Takes Two, Hazelight has once again stuck to a similar format. You can fluidly sprint, dash, double jump, and grapple to designated points pretty much any time. This creates a permeating familiarity throughout the game, so you always feel a ground level of comfort to move in the newest area, and you sort of feel like you're able to do that without any level of paralysis. We've all jumped from one game to another, and that muscle memory betrayal can happen. You mean to dash or jump or dodge, and you end up hitting the wrong button. That clumsy feeling when you come back to a game after a break, or when simple keybinds are just different enough to throw you off. Split Fiction manages to take you from one game experience to another, and you never feel that awkward or ungraceful stumbling that we've all experienced when we're doing a bit of game hopping. And that would have been an easy pitfall for this game to fall into, because believe me when I say this, every new chapter or mechanic set is vastly different than the previous. And another way that they stick to the basics is they use very simple visual cues and telegraphs. I didn't need a tutorial on what to shoot, where to stand, or what to do or where to move. The game is just built in such an intuitive way. It might feel weird to say this, but the game completely gets out of its own way. There is one area, however, where you might suddenly be left scratching your head on what to do next. It had some porta-johns sitting there, and the devs might have thought the solution was very obvious. We genuinely thought the game had kind of glitched out. We spent about 10 minutes restarting the checkpoint and going back and wandering around. And the solution was simple once we saw it, but this did stand out primarily because the rest of the game is just so pristinely built. You rarely have to question how to proceed or what you need to do. And that doesn't mean it's not satisfying, you're just not left wondering where you need to move. So, if you get stuck at the area with the porta-johns, just remember, you can throw them, and that's the only clue I'm going to give you. Now that we've established the basics as the foundation for why this game just feels so good to play, let's talk about why the journey is equally as incredible. One of the things that It Takes Two was praised for was how it basically had a bunch of video games inside of one video game, and that was true to a point. Sections with magnets or guns or the ability to rewind time, it was suddenly like playing a mini game inside of the larger game. Split Fiction decided to turn that volume knob up to 11. They quite literally made it the premise of this game. And the story and the voice acting starts out a little bit slow, and it certainly is not really the shining star of the game until later. But much like It Takes Two, this game has heart, and it actually creates really poignant and almost touching moments. It kind of makes me think of shows like The Office or Parks and Recreation, where it starts out kind of goofy, and then as it goes on, the characters start to grow on you and you kind of care about them. They actually do that with Split Fiction, and it doesn't feel forced or contrived. But the real crown jewel of this game is the eclectic and ever-changing journey that it takes you on. And I just want to highlight some of the standouts. First, the Mr. Hammer boss fight. This is sort of the first official boss fight in the game, and up to this point, it was certainly fun and enjoyable, but this is when I could tell they had really upped the quality of this game. A fast and frenetic fight where you each have a very specific job to do, and it was so satisfying that rewatching the fight for this video, I actually want to play it again, but be the other character. Your job is so different in fights like this that it can feel completely new when you're on the other side of it, which I think adds to the replay value. And the fight honestly ends in a pretty dope and cinematic way, and then there's another fight where you have very specific roles. It's called the parking attendant. And once again, the intensity, the mechanics, the clear telegraphs, and the use of color. I mean, solving it I think felt good, and beating it felt even better. You truly feel like you're overcoming a really great boss fight without the need to be overly punishing, and the respawn mechanic brings its own level of intensity because you're kind of frantically spamming the button to try to get back in case your partner dies, because if you both die, you do have to start over. But this fight had it all. I was on a platform, then I was on top of the boss, then I was inside of the boss, all while my wife had to navigate dodging cars and grabbing or throwing things outside. And then you get gravity bikes. And this isn't just fun because it's fast or challenging or dizzying at the same time. It ends with probably my favorite boss fight from this game. Fighting a giant tank on bikes might seem a little cliche or like something out of a Michael Bay movie, but this fight literally has elements that reminded me of Returnal boss fights. Large, sweeping fire attacks, there's wave blasts, there's AoE, you've got to jump over them to not take damage, and every phase of the fight is more fun than the last. You literally get to a point where you are ramping off of the enemy and shooting down into its weak point. It's just awesome. This is what I meant when I said there are parts of this game that are so good, you almost want them as their own game. Like, imagine a bullet hell roguelike Returnal sort of game with bosses like this where you're on bikes. I mean, I would play that. I would play that a lot, especially with co-op that is this satisfying. Then there are times where this game just sort of shows off, and they're sort of almost breaking the fourth wall with their game references and sort of winking at you. One section had us coming from gliding, which just felt phenomenal and fast, and then we were water skiing a moment later, and we're jumping over and dodging obstacles, and it all leads to this crescendo where we're on a train, and it's rotating in an almost Fall Guys obstacle course sort of way. But it's not over. It all ends with a classic bullet hell style boss where the perspective shifts to the side. And listen, I'm once again saying to myself, how does a game like this even exist? The degree with which they understand how to make so many game types and so many genres, but it's also satisfying, it's honestly impressive. And then there are other sections that are clearly signaling things like Contra. And there's a boss fight from multiple perspectives in this Contra-like area. And if you're not smiling while playing this, I think you're dead inside. It's just so fun. And the crazy part is, the Contra-like section is actually attached to an entire chapter where you have these guns, and the mechanics of the guns, they just get better and better. You're not actually playing the entire time from that side or 2D perspective. It's very, very enjoyable working together through quick sections or puzzly sections with these guns. There's even a section with clear nods to both Donkey Kong Jr., if you can remember back that far, and Donkey Kong Country, which I grew up with the Coleco, as well as the breathtaking Donkey Kong Country on the Super Nintendo. It felt like otherworldly at the time. This is just a game made for gamers. There were only two sections that were a little off that we didn't quite enjoy. One was like a dance boss fight. It didn't even seem that great. We didn't record it. It wasn't bad. And then there was another section where everything was sort of hand-drawn. There's these side quests you can do, and they're sort of optional. You may have seen some of the funny footage of, hey, you're a pig or a hot dog, or in this case, it was hand-drawn. It was super creative. It just wasn't all that satisfying or fun to play. But these are ridiculously small criticisms. I didn't even tell you about the game show that has a clear reference to GLaDOS from Portal in it, and you're trying not to blow each other up while working in tandem with the bomb. It is really fun, and it's just a side quest. It's just a game show. It's one of those things you definitely want to do. Don't skip any of those side quests. And listen, I don't want to say any more, okay? I want you to enjoy this game and all the great surprises and all the great mechanics, so let me just give you my conclusion. Split Fiction is an absolute must-play for any fan of co-op games. The worst thing about this game is it is going to ruin co-op games for you. We've all been there searching for those top co-op game lists of what you should play. This thing just rose to the #1 spot in my book, and I have played a lot of co-op games. But this is also a must-play for just fans of video games. It has so much charm and polish and creativity, and it's all jammed into one package. It's honestly hard to believe how they even created this game not even 4 full years after they shipped It Takes Two. And honestly, my biggest piece of advice to you is this. If you have not played It Takes Two yet, please play that first, because this game, Split Fiction, it elevates so much of what that game did. You will not want to play them in the reverse order. Hazelight has done it again, and it wouldn't surprise me if we end up seeing this game get a Game of the Year nomination and it's up on the podium with a bunch of really big titles in 2025. But those are just my thoughts. Would love to hear yours. If you found this review helpful, please remember to hit like, share, and subscribe, and check out the gameplay stream I'm going to be doing with my wife if you want to see what the game looks like in action. And as always, I look forward to seeing you in the next video.
Pet me or die, human.
What?
Pet me or die.
Whoa. Take it easy, Snowball.
Oh, death it is then.